Salut, come on, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another live stream. Today, I'm very honored to be in the presence of Richard Pendry of the Risk Consultancy. Now, I've streamed with Richard a number of times, talking about risks to business, to person, and I think today you want to focus on business risks for this year.
Yeah, good morning, Gareth, and thanks for having me back. And I've been missing our chats. We were supposed to talk on Friday, but unfortunately, we both were suffering from man flu. So
it was ridiculous.
Both of us rapping and coughing away. Shocking. It would have been a coughing and sneezing and spluttering, 20 minutes of that. So I'm glad we postponed it from today. And we're both feeling a bit better, but there we are. So yeah, wonderful. Thanks for having me back on. Today, I want to talk about the top 10 business risks which have been identified by the World Economic Forum. And I just want to have a little look over those top 10 things and just have a little chat. Anything that we think is interesting, we can pull out and put into the context where we are at the moment with in the UK.
You've got a nice graphic, which I believe I think will help illustrate that. So I'll just
let's get that.
Yeah, you ready?
Yeah, let's get it up on screen, and we can have a look at that.
Okay.
Yes, as I said, this is from the recently from the World Economic Forum. We've been looking into top 10 business risks. And we've got two columns when we get it up there. We've got the two-year on the left and the 10-year on the right. So let's make that a little bit bigger. And we're going to concentrate on the two-year column, which is on the left-hand side there. And number one, misinformation and disinformation, which is it's I wasn't expecting it to be number one. I wasn't expecting it to be on the list, but I think with the onslaught of artificial intelligence, I mean, let's face it. ChatGPT was available in October 2022, I believe.
Yes. Yeah,
and it's just going from strength to strength, and I think that number one listing comes from the advancement of artificial intelligence.
I also think it's actually some of the amalgamations of global networks, the Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, all being owned by one maniacal company who are intent on controlling data flow and information, the amalgamation of other companies behind the scenes, and the focus on global interests rather than global support.
Yeah, but let's have a look at the definition of misinformation. Misinformation, deliberately intended to deceive. Yeah, deliberately intended to deceive. Where, disinformation, it's similar, but it's more like of a propaganda used by governments and things like that, mainstream media. We've seen a lot of this recently, and I think this week the BBC has been hauled over the coals, and it's now being looked at for not representing things properly, having a bit of a bias there, being they're not non-partisan anymore. And we've seen this, and that's just an indication of where we're going. And so many people now, I for one, get my information from different. I look at the mainstream media. Yes, I look at the various stations on the mainstream media, but I also get my news from different sources such as Twitter and various other ones. And this, when through my academic career, this is it was drummed into me. You've got to read around the subject. You cannot just rely on one source. If you're relying on one source, you're living in an echo chamber, and you're only going to get what you want to hear. So you need to read around. For example, I on Twitter, I've got quite a large following on Twitter, and somebody said to me the one day, DM'd me and said, why are you following this particular person? You know, and I said, well, I want to find out what they're saying. I might not agree with what they're saying, but I need to find out what they're saying.
I think by avoiding listening to the
Yeah, people are listening.
Yeah, you are ending up in an echo chamber. It's like
absolutely.
It's like these people who only go to meetings where everybody agrees with their opinion. I think that's a very dangerous place to be.
Yeah, sycophants and things like that surrounded by. Yeah. So I think it's really important that we look at that and we question. We question where they're getting the information from, and has it been authenticated? Really needs to happen, and we've seen so much of this with Gaza, you know, over the last few months and things.
Yes.
People, you know, mainstream media, which you trust, and this is where I'm very cynical, and I go back to my time in Iraq, 2005 to 2007, and I, as a layperson, you know, what I saw on the TV was gospel to me. This is it. And then when I saw what was actually happening in Iraq and what was being portrayed by the mainstream media, it just didn't add up. And that was a life-changing moment for me. I became a lot more cynical. But there we are. Yeah. I
think when you take the blinkers off and you take in more of the world, the first thing you experience is shock. There's so much more that you didn't realize you were missing out on that is negative and positive. But also, I think it enables you to make better decision making, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, when we look at this, and there's an analytical tool called Pestle, okay, and Pestle is there. The businesses use to be able to external environment, to be able to establish that external environment, their operational environment, and understand what they're up against. And this absolutely reads like a Pestle analysis. And Pestle stands for political, economic, social, technical, legal, environmental, and pretty much every one of these top 10 risks have come under the subheading through Pestle. So yeah, so we need to be able to find out. We need to be able to read around, and we need to get as much information from different sources as possible to be able to make those informed decisions. But let's have a look at number 2 there. I mean, wow, you know, we're extreme weather events. Yeah,
I know.
What we've had over the weekend. I think we're on.
Can we ignore it anymore as our peril, you know?
Well, I mean, the thing is, when we look at it from a business risk point of view, you know, it's really important, because what about continuity? Business continuity is so important. And if you were taken out by a weather event, you know, let's look at Scotland at the moment. Scotland does not have any rail service. Yesterday, doesn't have any rail service. If you're relying on staff to come to your office and they can't get in, what is your business continuity plan? Really important. And another one with this as well is that last year I went to Angola, and I was working for a large oil company, and they had everything there. They had everything in place. They had the crisis management room was phenomenal. But the crisis management room was on the seaboard, okay, lovely, very lovely vista, okay. But if we're talking about extreme weather, and the crisis management room was on the ground floor of the building, which was on very, very close to the sea.
Yikes.
Storms, crisis management room taken out completely. And people are not thinking in respect, what are we up against? As I mentioned, most of the cities, the large cities in the world, are on seaboards or next to large rivers. You have to take that into consideration. Business continuity plans have to be updated regularly, because otherwise you're just going to be caught with your pants down.
Well, I see the next one is societal polarization.
Societal polarization. Yeah.
Is that geopolitical?
Geopolitical, plus also when we look at it, it's at the it's at the macro and the meso level as well. I mean, we're looking at there's a case in point which happened on the end of last week, which was the closure or the imminent closure of a huge part of the Tata Steelworks in Ebbw and the loss of nearly 3,000 jobs in that particular area. And there are no jobs in that area. I mean, Port Talbot is a depressed town anyway. The last time I was there, it was very depressed.
So the town is the steelworks.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so you now have, and it was mentioned there by politicians and the journalists, of the societal polarization, because you've got the metropolitan elite, wanting net zero to be reached and all the rest of it, but at what cost? Society, we've seen it. Society is becoming more polarized, and the follow-on from that will be a lot more violence on the streets, unfortunately.
Well, interstate armed conflict is at number 5, but
we've got it now. I mean, it's. I mean, we've got interstate armed conflict. We've got the Houthis on the news this morning with the raids there. I mean, let's not forget that the Houthis are proxies for the Iranians. When I was teaching Saudi Arabians last year, they were telling me about the rocket strikes that the Houthis were putting into Riyadh and various places in Saudi Arabia. So the Houthis are a very destabilizing group. Let's face it. When you go back to the history of them and what they're there, and the civil war that they engaged with the government in Yemen. Yeah, we've got that. But of course, when we look at that, there is a knock-on to our way of life. We now have ships going round the long way and not going through the Suez Canal, which I think Tesco and a lot of other large businesses, retail businesses, have said that there will be a knock-on effect. They will have to put on prices up for various goods because of the extra cost of getting their goods to the UK and Europe. Right. So, yeah, even though this happens, not in Europe, not in the UK, well, we've got a war at the edge of Europe with the Ukraine. But yeah, it does have an effect on what we do, on our way of life and our business. Absolutely.
Now, the one thing you did talk to me once before that was an ever increasingly large part of what you do is cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity, yeah. Well, again, today I'm looking at this list, and cybersecurity is cybersecurity, cyber terrorism, right? I'm yet. If somebody out there can give me an example of cyber terrorism, I would love to find out about it, because when I was doing my master's at St. Andrews in terrorism and political violence, they weren't able to actually present a case in point where cyber terrorism took place. Absolutely, cyber insecurity and cyber crime, they're the same. They use the same methodologies. But if somebody has an example, please get in touch with me and let me know, because I think we in the terrorism industry are struggling to find an example. But cybersecurity, absolutely. I mean, if your organization hasn't been hacked in some way, shape, or form, you're just a day closer to getting it hacked, because it's going to happen to you.
I get people attempting to hack into my servers every other day, but I see, luckily my firewall blocks them quite well, but I see them coming through. Yeah. The one thing I did notice in here was economic opportunity, or a lack thereof, and that all latches into the societal polarization that you mentioned earlier, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's lack of economic opportunity. We could look at that at the micro level, or it encourages a lot of migration for Africa and stuff like that. Because of the lack of opportunities there. I think we really need to be. I'm caught between a rock and a hard place with Africa. I've been there so many times, and we've pushed so much money into Africa, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better. But I do feel.
I think there's a natural tendency for tribalism, and that
Oh, yeah, tribal culture, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you look at somewhere like DRC, Central Africa, DRC, it's one of the richest countries from minerals and other resources in the world, and yet it is so poor. They just can't get their act together. It's like Afghanistan. The same with Afghanistan. Afghanistan has super huge resources of rare earth and things that we need for batteries and stuff like that, and yet it's so expensive to get it out because of the security that you'd have to pay. Have to pay for the security to get the actual stuff out, and it's not viable. Yeah, but lack of economic opportunity is definitely pushing for migration. And then coming down from that, we've got number 8, involuntary migration. And this is not the migration that we're seeing with the boats and all the rest of it, because that's voluntary. People are actually doing that. That they have motivation to do that. And when we talk about
the stuff that happens with
displaced people having to move because and especially in the poorer countries, because there is when we look at extreme weather, they haven't had the rain and the crops have failed, so they've actually got to move. And that in Africa is huge, and yet we will eventually see that knock on from that because of the way that we are at the moment with the migration.
Yes, and that sort of leads to economic downturn. If everyone's moving away from an area, if the like Tata is removing opportunity, that then means that the net effect is a complete economic downturn.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make for good reading, this, does it, Gareth? Yeah,
it's a bit depressing, frankly.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the thing is, that's what risk is. We need to remind people that risk can be also positive as well. Taking a risk and it does make for some quite depression. But then again, what we have to look at, this is the information out there, and once we know what we're up against, then organizations can actually find out if they're vulnerable to the risks, and if they are vulnerable, what they can do to actually strengthen their mitigation against it. So at least the information is out there for the forward-thinking, proactive businesses to take advantage. And there's so often that I get called in after the event, after an event has happened, can you please come and help us? And it's far more expensive to retrofit policies, procedures, and the way a company does business. Far more expensive to retrofit it than to actually do it before the actual event has occurred.
Well, look, I didn't even want to look at the 10-year plan. Did you notice that on the 10-year advice, it was that on the top 10, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all about natural disaster. It's either there's lack of biodiversity, reduction in native species, and all the rest of it, and all the other stuff that we've seen on happening right now gets pushed to the background. Frankly,
writing's on the wall, isn't it? The writing's on the wall. What are we going to do about it?
Yes, it is pretty much. What are you going to do today?
And one of the interesting things as well, what I come across, is that after a significant event, when businesses get closed down, and we've seen it with COVID now, a third of the businesses will never reopen. The other third will reopen, struggle on for a couple of years, and then finally give in. But the other third, the proactive ones, the ones that got their act together, will make a killing. And
Yes,
that is
because
what that information is there for.
yes,
That's what
because
that information is there for. It's there now. Take advantage of it. Come and speak to people like me who can be able to identify, and your operational environment. We identify the threats within there, what you can do to move forward to mitigate the risks that are going to impact on you and other organizations in your field.
So look, this podcast wasn't really supposed to make you all feel depressed about the world we live in. It's actually what it's supposed to be for, if I can be blunt about it, is to wake you up and say there is opportunity out there, but
Absolutely.
you need to
Yeah.
grasp it.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much, Richard, for taking the time out today to load us up with more depressing news. No, it's not. To give us the put us on the edge of opportunity, so that we may take that opportunity with both hands.
Exactly.
And I'd like to say it's been a pleasure talking to you, Richard. As ever, you shine light on areas I hadn't yet thought of looking at. If knowledge is power. Once you know about it, you can take the opportunity.
And also, knowledge dispels fear.
This is true, but it can be a bit scary if the knowledge shakes some long-held beliefs, and that may be the part you have to get past. I think knowing what's really going on is so helpful. Oh, I've just got a commenting. Elaine Godley says, interesting comment stash now to unload a ton of logs. Right. Well, we could talk about whether logs are a good idea or not until the towels come home. All I say to you is thank you for watching. Thank you for taking part. Richard, once again, thank you for educating me. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week, when we should be talking still further, hopefully with a bit more of a cheery theme to it. Until then, thank you very much, and I wish you all good mental health.